In the chorus of Bob Dylan's song, My Back Pages, Dylan proclaims, but I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. I've always taken that to mean that when he was younger, he thought, as the young often do, that he knew everything. Or to put it another way, that he had all the wisdom of being older then, although he wasn't. Now that he is actually older, he realizes that he knows nothing, or he feels like he is young with still so much to learn. Ironically, the now 80-year-old Bob Dylan wrote the song when he was only 23 years old. But that is how I feel too. I used to be so sure of everything. Everything was black and white. I knew it all. But now I see many more shades of gray. I'm no longer quite so sure. Recently, Shelley and I had the privilege of having a truly beautiful Shabbat dinner at our daughter Becky's apartment in Jerusalem with a group of her friends. All of her friends have two things in common. They are all studying or teaching Judaism, and they all practice and or teach meditation. Many of them have dabbled in some Eastern traditions, and while they love the practice of meditation, they have found themselves drawn back into Judaism and inculcating their meditation as part of their Jewish practice. Before dinner started, I was chatting with one young man, and I asked him why he was drawn back to Judaism. What was it about the Eastern meditative traditions that didn't suffice for him? And he told me that while the Eastern traditions are beautiful, they don't teach you how to live in a complicated world, a world where you experience many ups and downs, a world where it isn't always about searching for the transcendent, but sometimes just about navigating life's daily ups and downs. And Judaism does have rituals and practices that help you through those moments. In other words, Judaism helps you work your way through the gray areas of life. It strikes me that our Parshat today, we read this morning, juxtaposed against the time of the year that we're in the Jewish calendar, is one such gray area. Just a few moments ago, we read from Parshat Mattot-Mas'ey. The latter Parshat Mas'ey has a listing of all the travels and stops the Israelites made on their 40-year journey through the desert. We recounted all the steps that we took on the journey to the Promised Land. And you may have noticed the tune with which Rabbi Rada chanted those journeys, alternatively known as the Shirat Hayam, or the Desert Traveling Tune. It's a triumphant sounding melody. We have prevailed. We made it through this 40-year test, and we're now poised to enter into the Promised Land. Da 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 ya da 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 da. It's a triumphant sounding tune. On the other hand, we're smack in the middle of the period of time on our calendar between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av, when we are mourning the destruction of the temple and our exile from that very same land that we're about to enter in Parshat Mas'ey. So how are we supposed to feel? How should I feel? Should I feel excited for the Israelites who are poised on the other side of the Jordan, poised to enter the land of Israel? Or should I feel sorrow for the Jews who were exiled therefrom? And lest you say to me, it's just a coincidence that we read Parshat Mas'ey during the 3 weeks, let me assure you, we do so every year. And it didn't have to be so. Had the rabbis decided to double up on some of the parshiot in the book of Deuteronomy, rather than the ones that are doubled up in earlier books, we might only very rarely have this overlap. So rather than help me through this gray area, it seems that Judaism is pushing me into a gray area. Here's another gray area regarding Israel for you. When I was young, growing up in an Orthodox Zionist home belonging to the Zionist youth movement Bnei Akiva, I was sure that when I became an adult, I would make Aliyah. Indeed, with every trip I made to Israel, this feeling grew stronger and stronger. I love the feeling that I get when I'm in Israel, standing in the very places our ancestors stood, no longer being a minority, where I can feel free to express my Jewishness to its full extent. Yet here I stand today in Dallas, Texas, not even considering that possibility any longer. While we were just in Israel, I had the incredible privilege of officiating a bat mitzvah of the daughter of dear friends of ours at the Robinson's Arch, the egalitarian section of the Western Wall. After the bat mitzvah, we heard a little bit about the struggles of the women of the wall from the rabbi who runs the Robinson's Arch area. As we were walking away, I was explaining to my friend that yes, I support the cause of the women of the wall, but really I have mixed feelings. Why? Because I wish we wouldn't make such a deal. Part of me wishes we wouldn't make such a deal out of the wall in the first place. I went on to explain that while I love what the wall means to us as a Jewish heritage site and remembering the temple, the Judaism that I love is the one the rabbis developed after the temple was destroyed and they were exiled. The Avot de Rabbi Natan, one of the so-called minor tractates that's appended to the Talmud, tells the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai walking with Rabbi Yoshua near Jerusalem after the destruction of the temple. When Rabbi Yoshua broke out into tears, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai consoled him, saying, "Be not grieved, my son. There is another equally meritorious way of gaining atonement, even though the temple is destroyed. We can still gain atonement through deeds of loving kindness." I feel like Rabbi Yochanan. Yes, this new way of practicing Judaism may even be better. And it certainly is what opened the door to egalitarianism in Judaism by removing the main ritual practice away from the priests and putting it into the hands of every individual. Yet despite all these rationales that I'll tell myself, I truly felt that officiating a bat mitzvah at the wall was one of the greatest privileges of my life. Go figure. So this is more gray areas for me. Here's one more gray area for you. In today's Parsha, in the first Parsha that we read, Parshat Mattot, Numbers 33:53, we read, "And you shall take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have assigned the land to you to possess." This verse, at least according to the opinion of Ramban Nachmanides, represents a positive commandment to dwell in the land of Israel and inherit it. But the necessity to live in any specific land seems, to me at least, to be at odds with some of the precepts of monotheism itself. The ancient pagan world was filled with the belief in territorial gods who ruled over one land or another. If you lived in and served the god of Canaan, and you went into Egypt where another god reigned, you lost your god's protection and were fair game to the local population to do with as they pleased. Indeed, the Talmud in Megillah 29a brings source texts to demonstrate to us that wherever Israel was exiled to, the Shekhinah went with them. In other words, wherever we are, God is with us and we can serve God. The belief in one God meant that we are all children of the same God and all created equal by that God. Yet despite these many gray areas, it's undeniable how much the land of Israel means to us and means to me personally. As for me, the feeling I get when I'm there still manages to overcome all of my rationalities. While it's possible to be a perfectly good Jew living here in Dallas, Texas, and it's entirely possible to construct a wonderful Jewish congregation and even a Jewish community here, only in Israel can we construct an entire society that at least grapples with how to organize itself based on Jewish values. And that is a major distinction. For while Christianity may say, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's," the Torah goes beyond that. The Torah is not merely a framework for personal growth, which it is. The Torah also contains many laws on how to structure a society. It contains social safety nets, civil and tort laws, employer-employee relationship laws, environmental laws, and laws on how to treat your animals, and laws how to arrange governmental and judicial systems. In other words, as the young man in Becky's apartment so correctly noted, Judaism tries to help us navigate all of the seemingly mundane aspects of living. It attempts to bring God's holiness down to earth, to help us work through those gray areas of life, rather than have us try to achieve transcendence above it. And only in Israel can we truly make an attempt to do that as an entire society. And it's for all these reasons, I suppose, or at least these are some of the reasons, that when Israel is hailed as the startup nation, or when she immediately sends first responders to help in the face of a disaster, such as recently occurred in Florida, we beam with pride in her. And it is also why, when Israel faces a conflict with her enemies, we get a pit in our stomach, hoping she does nothing to bring us shame, which of course is almost impossible given the way Israel is covered by the media. But it is also why, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but we must take a lesson from the tribes of Reuven and Gad, who, as we read today in Parshat Mattot, say to Moshe, we would like to settle here on the other side of the Jordan and not in Israel proper, because we are cattle herders and this land here is good cattle country. We will establish our cities here, but we will go with the rest of the Israelites into the land of Israel, help them capture the land, and only then will return to our families. In other words, we, who for whatever reasons we have, do not want to get up now and live in the land of Israel, we still have a responsibility toward our brothers and sisters in Israel. We must realize that our fate as Jews is ever so intricately bound with the fate of our brothers and sisters in Israel. Shabbat Shalom.